Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the September Riverfront Design Committee meeting. Let's start off with roll call. Paula?
John Joyce.
Here.
Scott Howard.
Here.
Mike Voorhees.
Here.
Jonathan Heisel.
Here.
Don Kasperite. Barbara Larson. John Postick.
Here.
Dana Templeton.
Present.
Michelle Dean. You have a quorum.
Excellent. The first thing I'd like to do is recognize Michelle over here to my right and Mike over here to my left. They're new committee members, and we're excited to have you as part of the committee. Next thing I'd like to do, if anybody can remember our June 1st meeting, we've got minutes that we need to have approved. I'd entertain a motion to either, correct them or approve them.
Make a motion to approve. Second.
Got that, Paula? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved.
I'll abstain. I wasn't here.
There you go. Okay, item number 3 is cases withdrawn. There are none. Item number 4, continuance requests. There are none. Item number 5, the consent docket. We don't have anything. And next, I'd like to move to item number 7, other business. We'd like to recognize Paul Dedman. Lisa?
Yes, you have a resolution before you to recognize Paul for his outstanding service on the committee the last 10 years. So I'll read the resolution and then we'll ask for comments. A resolution of the Riverfront Design Committee of the City of Oklahoma City acknowledging Paul Dedman for his valuable service and dedication to the Riverfront Design Committee. Whereas Paul Dedman has faithfully devoted his time and expertise to serve the citizens of Oklahoma City as a Riverfront Design Committee member from October 2007 to August 2017. And whereas Paul Dedman was among the inaugural group of Riverfront Design Committee members and therefore especially charged with establishing and demonstrating enduring standards for committee procedures, conduct, and decorum. And whereas Paul Dedman has routinely contributed to the committee through his knowledge and insight as a member of the Oklahoma City Riverfront Redevelopment Authority. And whereas Paul Dedman has demonstrated uncommon dedication to the committee through his methodical attention to detail and earnest regard for the applicable standards and guidelines in the consideration of projects presented to the committee. And whereas Paul Dedman's leadership of and participation in committee deliberations has always been characterized by a steadfast and constant perseverance to promote the revitalization and enhancement of the riverfront design districts subject to committee review. And now therefore be it resolved that the Riverfront Design Committee hereby respectfully commends Paul Dedman for his outstanding years of service to the Riverfront Design Committee of the City of Oklahoma City, adopted by the Riverfront Design Committee of the City of Oklahoma City on this 7th day of September 2017. I think applause.
Thank you. Paul, do you care to say anything?
Thank you. I'm a lawyer. I have to say something. Thank you very much. I hadn't realized, actually, that it had been 10 years that we've been on this committee. It's been a very interesting situation, particularly because the river is new and developing all the time. And I think it's a unique position to serve on this committee. For those of you who are new, there are rules, and my admonition to you is to enforce them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Okay, that brings us back to, sorry, you need a motion? Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve the resolution.
Motion to approve. Second.
Did you get that, Paul? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Paul. Okay, next on the agenda, we'll go back to item number 6, cases for individual consideration. We have one, SRCA 17-00008 at 6 Southeast 4th Street. Is the petitioner present?
Good morning. I'm glad you guys have had a break since June because we now have probably one of the biggest cases that you've had. A very interesting site, and I'm excited that I actually got to go out there. They were very nice, and I got a tour. And so I was able to get some really great photos. All of us have driven by it for decades. And I didn't realize just exactly everything that occurred out there. So not only is there a lot of buildings that have been built over time, there's a lot of history to it, which I included in the staff report. What you're looking at here is that's one of the oldest buildings, which you really can't see unless maybe if you were up on the railroad tracks, you could probably see it because it's kind of centrally located. But as you can see from this photo, and you're looking toward downtown, the views out there are unbelievable, especially you can see everything that's going on, the current building that's going on. One of the things you'll notice in the staff report is there was a lot of different guidelines from not only your handout, but also from the Downtown Development Framework, which was adopted back in December of 2015, as well as the TIF policy that cover this piece of property. So there is a lot of information that I've referenced as far as what was anticipated to go at this location. One of the important things that I included in this dealing with the TIF policy is this site, although the intensive level survey for this area did show that potentially this could be a district, the TIF policy did not include this site or any of the buildings in those buildings that they were saying were historic in nature and really needed to be considered for retention. So we included that information in here as well. We also included what the DDF anticipated or recommends for development of this area, which obviously is more intense than what you're looking at and is not agriculture in nature. That area is definitely, we don't have agricultural uses going on, although there are two buildings. Let me get over to the, this is on the east side, and most of you remember we had redevelopment of the building on the right came before you, and if you haven't noticed, because you can see it from 40, they're currently doing that development right now. They're converting that into an office building, and it has potential to have a restaurant with rooftop dining, which is really exciting. And on the left, that's the climbing wall, which is, for the longest time, was the only reason people ever went over in this area. So those two are really the only in-use buildings. They're ag in nature, but that is not the usage of those buildings at this time. So that is adjacent to the east, just to give you kind of a reference. In looking at these pictures, you can see that that's the OG&E substation that you all had to approve the new location for that's being relocated to allow for the convention center development. You're looking there at Boathouse District, so you can really see a long way. We're looking over 40. Down, you can see Pull Apart, which has also been there forever, looking across 40, and the elevated railroad tracks. And on the other side of that, you can see the sculpture, as well as kind of see the area where the park is going in and where all the clearing has been done for the convention center. So there is a lot going on around this property. You can also see down into Bricktown, looking across the area that is not included in Bricktown and the area where Oklahoma City Boulevard has gone in. So in including all this information in here, we tried to set the picture for what is anticipated, what the TIF is anticipating for this area, the type of uses, which includes some mixed use for this area, which is similar to what we've got going on downtown. It's a large site. Most of the sites that you all see are not this large in nature. There's 30 buildings that they're coming in for you. And they're in various conditions, as you could see from the pictures that I included. Some of them have areas where they've removed equipment or where over time areas have been cut out, such as you're looking over there where it says Building B. And a lot of them are just metal buildings. Some like these, which the seat houses, I think, are kind of a really interesting building. The shape is very interesting, but they're not insulated. There's no HVAC system, obviously. So if somebody were looking at trying to retrofit these, some of you are architects, so it's going to mean more to you, but I have no earthly idea how much that would cost. And the shape of these buildings, while they're unique, would make it kind of difficult to convert them to other uses. This one I actually went in because part of the side had been cut out, and I just thought it was kind of it's an interesting space, but I don't know usage-wise. So on that site, there are several of these very large buildings. And I included in here a reference to the fact that they did not provide us with a proposal for redevelopment at this time, but there's been some articles in the paper that I referenced. And there was a reference to some people they have working on this. And we all know that at one point they were looking at doing the soccer facility here, but we all read that that did fall through. So, at this time, they have not given us a redevelopment plan. So with that being said, I think probably the best picture to look at would be the one, they actually provided this in their application. Let me get to it. This one right here, which it's so that you can actually look at the whole site, although what we're looking at here, looking north. On the left is the railroad tracks, and I've outlined this particular area in red so you can get a feel for the extent of how large this area is. And you can see that over in this area, those buildings that I showed you, the climbing wall right here, and then the building that's being renovated right now. So this is the railroad tracks, and this along here is 40, just for your reference. And so it's kind of hard until you look at it from this perspective to see just how large it is. Staff is, in the staff report, staff was recommending approval of this request based on the information we provided you. And if you have questions for staff, we'd be glad to address any of the specific guidelines that we included in here. There were no regulations that we included in the staff report, so they're not proposing to do anything against any of the regulations that we have.
Yeah, I'll add on a little bit to what Laura was explaining. So there are 5 pieces, 5 specific guidelines in the demolition criteria. There's design, form, and urban character, significance, structural integrity, economic feasibility, and accompanying proposal for replacement. The committee can weigh those and combine those however they deem appropriate for this site in this case.
I think at this time it'd be good for the applicant to come forward and kind of give us their spiel.
Thank you, the committee, for your time. I'm Clint Whitworth. I represent Producers Cooperative Oil Mill. I filed the application on its behalf. Everybody knows that we were under contract to sell the property and to the Bob Funk Group. That fell through. It's no longer under contract, so we switched gears, and the company decided to the best way to get the property where it was marketable and ready for development would be to clean off because they've ceased the operations at that facility. So they felt like it was best to remove those structures, assess any type of environmental condition that needs to be remediated, and get the property ready for development. They have retained Bob Stearns with Sooner Development, as well as Don Hayes with Hayes Brokerage, and they're working on a master plan for developing the property, but at the same time looking for potential investors to come in and acquire the property as a whole or in parcels. From our standpoint, the marketability of the property itself is stymied until we remove those buildings. As you can see, where the property lies directly west of the property is where the new convention center is going to go. Directly north of the property is where the new boulevard has just been installed. Directly to the east is the canal, as well as the rock climbing station. And then to the south is I-40, and then obviously the boathouse district is close. This property is in a prime location. It's the only thing left in this area to be developed, and we just think letting the property sit there in its current condition doesn't help or facilitate the sale of the property and the marketability for development. So for those reasons, we filed our application. We're requesting to demolish all 32 structures over 4 phases, and we've submitted to the committee with our application specific dimensions of each building that we intend to demolish, and we're here today to answer any questions that the committee has.
Does anybody have any questions for the applicant? I guess I have a quick one in terms of, has there been any, one of the things like with the demolition they talked about, has there been any studies by structural engineers, for example, as in terms of the soundness of some of those buildings?
When we were under contract with the Funk Group, part of the obligation was to remove the structures. We retained a demolition contractor to do that.
Okay.
He came in and assessed that, and we do have a contract with that. And to answer your question in short, no, we have not gone to each specific structure. Most of the structures are warehouses that are just tin with basically metal poles to keep it up. They were just to house cottonseed. They had aeration units. But beyond that, there's one brick structure that Laura showed you earlier that was a production office, and then we've got a main office at the front that's probably the newest building on the facility. Those would probably be the only 2 buildings that have that one you're looking at is the main office. It's probably the newest building on the facility. That one I would assume would be structurally sound. The production office, which is probably the oldest building that she showed you earlier, you're looking at it right now. It's a brick building. It's probably the least structurally sound. Just from looking at it, if you go look at it, it's got some deterioration, and I don't know what the economics would be to bring it to where it'd be structurally sound for retention. And to answer your question, I rambled on for a while, but no, we've not assessed that.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions for the applicant?
You did mention you were looking into remediation or something, especially around the solvent plant. That was something that you had looked into. I mean, I'm assuming the solvent plant, the word solvent, kind of.
We've had numerous environmental studies performed on the environmental condition of the property. It is relatively clean. There's not anything that was, you got to understand this was a vegetable oil facility, not a crude oil. And for the majority of its process, it was a mechanical extraction. They actually used machines to take the oil out of the cottonseed. Just recently did they start using chemicals, and that was highly regulated. We were in compliance with EPA and DEQ on that. But from an environmental standpoint, we don't expect anything, but we really need to remove these buildings so that we can fully assess the environmental condition of the property. Because any investor, any developer, anybody that has an interest in this property is going to want to have all of those things looked at with a fine-tooth comb. They want to look at it with a microscope. And so until we remove those buildings and we're in a position where we can fully assess those areas that are under those buildings, we're not ever going to have those assurances to any developer or any investor. So that's why it's so important for us to have the consent of this committee so that we can move forward with the demolition, so that we can immediately begin to remove those buildings and assess the environmental condition underneath those buildings and start that process. I just think it's going to facilitate, the development of that area. It's going to facilitate, it's going to answer any questions that any buyer may have, any investor may have. And anyway, I hope that answered your question.
No, I was just trying to bring it up, make sure everybody understood that there was potential for that. And
Has a market analysis been conducted to assess the viability of redeveloping at least portions of this site, maintaining the historic structures, or where did the thought come from that it needs to be cleaned to sell it?
Well, you got to understand, we were under contract with a group, Bob Funk Jr.'s group, and during that process, we didn't know exactly what their development plans were other than what they had put forth to the public through press releases, and that included mixed use. It included a soccer stadium, and they had spent a lot of time and energy on their side, but we were not a part of that process. But during that process, they had asked us, part of the requirement for us was that we were going to have to remove all structures on the property. So we assumed that they had done their due diligence, and there was not anything of historical value for them as far as their development plan of the property to retain anything as part of their plan. Additionally, we've looked at it, and Laura touched on this earlier, but there's not any building in this property that we're asking to demolish that has been designated as a historical structure. That there's been a lot of those that have been identified, but to my understanding, none of the buildings within our property are one of those structures that it's been listed as something that needs to be preserved.
Okay. Any more discussion among committee members? Go ahead, Dana.
I just have one more. So basically what you're saying is you have no idea who's going to buy this or what the purpose is going to be. You're going to either sell it as the one large 37 acres or you're going to have, or part and parcel is what you said, based on whoever wants to buy. So when we see comments like a mixed use of housing, retail, and offices, or mixed use center, or high density flex, we really don't know that. We don't know who's buying it and for what purpose it's going to be, right?
Yes, ma'am.
But which has no bearing on this hearing because you're just wanting to demo it. I'm just asking for
Yeah, let me try to answer that. Like I said, we were under contract, and that fell through in the spring. We haven't had time because of that. We had to switch gears when we went out of contract, and so now we've started our own due diligence of trying to assess the development side. Like I said, we've retained Bob Stearns with Sooner Investment. He's probably developed more retail in Oklahoma than any other person, any other developer. So we've got the right person involved to do that. Mr. Stearns is looking at that. He's trying to develop a master plan that may work for the property, but we don't have anything in a presentation form right now. Somebody may come along when Mr. Stearns gets that in a presentation form, and they may say, hey, we want to do this ourselves, and they may want to buy the whole thing. Or you're right, it may go along where we end up getting investors that may want a piece of it. But at the end of the day, anybody that develops this property, it's going to be a part of a PUD, and they're going to have to come back and bring it in front of you guys to look at because there's certain rules and regulations, and if there's anything that's outside of those, they're going to have to ask for a variance from this committee. And so, in our opinion, we just wanted to demolish the structures and get it ready so that we can move forward with the development. And then, whatever form or fashion that this development comes in, they'll have to come back before you committee so that you can ensure that it's something that Oklahoma City needs and it fits the criteria that you guys are striving to maintain as a committee.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to speak against the demolition? I guess at this point, I'd kind of like to open it up for discussion just among the committee members. The thing that I'm kind of seeing that we're sort of not talking about is there's two different futures for this site in my mind. There's one that we go in, we demolish everything like they're proposing. It could come back, it could be, there's going to be absolutely nothing there to tell you that this was ever a oil mill for over 100 years, a big part of our city right next to downtown. It could be a I mean, within our guidelines, I'm not saying it's going to be a bad development, but it could potentially be a development that just has no reminder there of anything about the past. Or it could be a development that tries to retain at least a few of these buildings and kind of preserve the historical significance that this production plant had for 100 years. Now, there's economic problems with that, but that's not really our problem as a committee. We're just looking out for what's the best for the city. And I haven't heard, like when you say things like, well, these buildings aren't historic, well, the reason they're not on the National Register is because nobody proposed to put them on the National Register. So that doesn't kind of hold any weight with me. So, does anybody else have any kind of thoughts along those lines?
Well, John, to add to that, I guess my thoughts would be, and I realize you're going to be selling the property to another developer, but I personally would like to see some historical context or character built back in to whatever is developed. Not that we would allow metal buildings now with the overlay district as it is, but some semblance of character that just does respect the historical nature of what was there in some form or fashion. At least that's what I'd like to see.
And if I may elaborate on Scott's point, I think my biggest sticking point is that this is an all or nothing vote. This is demolish the entire site or reject the demolition of the entire site. I think it's a discussion that may be better informed if we were discussing smaller portions of it, but to go along with both of your points, it's kind of a difficult proposition when our Riverfront guidelines directly discuss the preservation of historic resources, and this is kind of contrary to that, or at least I haven't seen evidence that there is sufficient justification in favor of going against that.
When the applicant came in, he advised that they were tearing it down. Is there 4 phases or
Yes,
4
ma'am.
phases? And we talked about him applying for each phase. And it was my recommendation that he just go ahead and apply for the whole thing, come before the committee one time for the discussion. So I just wanted to, that was one of their original intents, was just to deal with each phase. And you mentioned it's an all or nothing thing. They provided you with their documentation of their phases. So I just wanted to mention that that could be something for you to look at, because there's maps in here that show what each of their phases were. So that might be something that would fall in line with what you were just discussing.
Could we ask, before we go for a vote, have a limitation or something put on it that maybe they leave maybe the production building or one building to kind of, even though economically that may not be feasible, but just to kind of have as a starting point on this skint off 37 acres, just have, I don't know, a launching of something to help kickstart the design. I don't know, is that something that you can do?
You can ask the applicant if that's something they would be willing to do. I don't think that's a bad idea. I think it doesn't make sense to save anything absent a real master plan for the site. But that's just my opinion.
I would agree with Dana. I think that in fairness to an applicant who needs to make economic sense of whatever we're requesting, probably not something that we can ask or should ask on the spot. Probably something that might be better to request as a resubmission if we went that route.
Laura, can you point out can you look through which map shows the phasing? Is it in here? I can't immediately.
If you go to the,
You just passed.
this is where it starts, the phasing in your packet. So it's about maybe a third of the way back or halfway back. And what he did was, you can see this one says Phase 1 demolition, and then it lists the buildings. And then after each one of those is a map that shows that area highlighted in yellow. And just for your reference point on this one, 40 is down here. The maps are, this map is facing to the north. And so then after each one of these, they provided us, this is the building permit / a demo application, and so this has the specifics, and this is showing that this one building is over 38,000 square feet. So that is how they split this up, and so then each one, like this seed house and its information. So if you keep looking through there, you're going to eventually, he had tabs on it. I really couldn't put tabs on it because of the way that we mass produce our packets. So when you keep looking back, you're going to end up, and then here's phase 2, and it lists the buildings for phase 2, and then there'll be a phase 3 and then a phase 4. So if phase 1 was down here, you've got phase 2, which is in the middle. Let me keep going, and then you have...
But, I mean, there's not one map color-coded, phase 1, phase
No.
2, phase 3.
No, and then I believe phase 3 includes the largest seed house and includes most of this stuff on the north, and then phase 4 is the front office that he referenced as the newest building, which is here, and then what's referred to as the garage. So that's phase 4. So they're keeping that until the end. That's at the entrance to the facility. So from this map, we've got phase 1, which is down here. We've got phase 2, which is in the middle. You have phase 3, which is kind of in the north and the east. And then phase 4 are these last two here at the entrance.
Were these phases what you originally presented before they were combined? This order?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Phase 1, part of this combined application. Is that what you originally submitted as a phase 1? And your phase 2 listed here in the packet is what you submitted originally as a phase 2 before the decision was made to combine
He
them?
submitted the whole thing when he came to meet with me. He had the whole packet. And we sat down and talked about it because he advised me he had 4 phases.
Okay.
And I suggested that we needed to really deal with the whole thing at once.
What is your timeline for the 4 phases of demolition? I mean,
Assuming that the committee approves this, then we'll pull our demolition permits as soon as we can get those issued by the city. And our demolition contractor's ready to get started. He anticipates that we're really looking at probably 5 months to complete the demolition of all structures. Probably on a best day, with weather permitting, maybe 45 to 60 days per phase. But with some built-in, probably 4 to 5 months.
Does anybody have a motion that they would like to make?
I'll move approval.
Okay, so we have a motion for approval. Do we have a second? Okay, not hearing a second. Would you, as applicant, would you consider changing the proposal at this time to just that first phase? I think that's pretty easy to understand.
Which is that.
It's kind of the extreme south end of the facility.
And I have that map for phase 1 up on the screen right now.
I mean, just in thoughts of kind of not to kind of completely shut you down. And that would give us time to kind of consider some of the production building is not included in that. There's a couple other buildings that I saw out there that were concrete or masonry that I don't believe would be included in that.
You want me to respond?
Yes.
will the committee allow me a minute to consult with my client?
Sure.
Or let him address that to the committee? He's the president and CEO of the company that owns the property. If you'd allow me to at least talk to him or have him address the committee.
Well, it's kind of like at this point, we didn't get a second on the motion to approve, so that's not looking too good. So we're either, we could, talk about a continuance, or we could talk about trying to maybe approve part of it, so, sure.
Okay, thank you.
And just while he's doing that, some of the buildings that would be included in Phase 1, we've got Seat House 5, the whole house, trying to get no, it's behind, Seat House 2, which is in the lower right corner, not anything north of there. So you're seeing Seat House 8 and 1 and 6 and 7, none of those are in Phase 1. There's the whole house again, Seat House 3 and 4. So, and that is not, that's the northeast corner. So let me get back to his phase map, which is right there. So the whole house is this lower left, whoops. And then I showed you Seat House 5, and then 2, 3, and 4. So it's that extreme southern portion of those. Some of these other areas there's concrete where buildings had been that have been gone for a while out there. This is, and I'm not sure how long some of those have been gone.
I have a thought for the committee. As I mentioned on Dana's comment earlier, I think that the way this phasing has been broken up has not been for development purposes, it's been for demolition purposes. I think really if we have any intention of requesting that the applicant preserve any of the structures on the site, that we as a board, the city as a whole, and the applicant are probably best served by allowing the applicant to resubmit strategic buildings which are maybe the most prime for preservation or redevelopment if we intend to request that at all, rather than go about it as phased for demolition. It's just my thought.
I would, or maybe resubmit with different phases with different buildings is pretty much what you're saying. But
Yes, sir.
After consulting with my client, and I wanted to tell the committee the phases are our phases. We did that intentionally because at the time we were still operating, marketing whole cottonseed and other products in those facilities, and so we did it in phases because we were going to first do the buildings on the south side that we were not utilizing. And then as we moved forward and we got product out of the other buildings, and so that's the reason that they're in the phases that they are, is because it made sense for us from a business standpoint to move them forward from south to north and kind of do them in a group of buildings. And in talking to my client, and we wanted to see if the committee would entertain this, is maybe approving our application with a modification that we could demo all structures but retain the production office, which is the oldest brick building, and maybe the front office, and then maybe Seat House number 9, and leave those structures standing to be brought back before the committee at a later time. Those would be the most likely.
And I'm going to show the pictures of the buildings that he was talking about. Was the front office, which is an aggregate, I don't know if it's tilt up or what, but it's concrete with the aggregate on it.
Right.
And then he referenced, whoops.
You just went past it.
I did.
Right.
The production office, which is here. And then he referred to Seat House number 9, which is in the northeast corner, which is, let me get there. Oops. It's actually the largest. Where did it go? There it is. It's actually the largest one of the seat houses. That's 4. But, and so those locations on the map they showed, I'll show you where those are, is the production office, which is down here, the main office, which is back up in here, and then seat house number 9, which is here. You can see that is the largest of those seat houses. Production office is here.
Historical 100 buildings.
Looks like number 5 is 35,000 square feet.
You're probably looking at what I'm looking to look at, so. Yeah, I was going to say, it's very. I just wanted to show you where those were located with respect to the overall site.
Mike, would you care to present another motion?
Okay. So your client's okay with possibly keeping seat house number 9, front office, production office, the ones that were identified Laura just showed us, demolish the rest,
The sales office, those
Yeah.
3.
those 3.
Production, sales.
Yeah.
Well, that what you're referring to as sales, he called it the main office.
Got it.
That's the one with the aggregate, the one-story.
Okay.
I don't see any need to keep that one.
Unless you guys want it.
No.
I don't see.
Other than it's
No.
probably one of the newest buildings. It's probably in the best shape of any of them, as far as it being able to be used for something. But
If
as
you
far
needed
as
to, yeah,
reflective of the
Use it for
property.
a hub or place to, but it has no significance.
No, ma'am, we didn't need to keep it. And like I said, for talking to our developer and looking at these, it was just the economics, the feasibility of retaining these structures in any type of master plan was just going to be really unworkable, and that's why we presented it to do all structures. But yes, after speaking with my client, they're willing to amend their application to demo all structures except for the production house and seat house number 9 at this time. But we may come back before this committee with another application to seek your approval to demolish those structures, and hopefully at that time we'll have more of a concrete development plan and be able to explain to the committee in detail why we can't keep those structures that you asked us to retain.
But let me ask you a question. As far as the production office goes, is it structurally connected to, I forgot the name of that. There's another, is it the shipping and receiving area? Okay, production office is on the left. Is there just a metal building in between them, or, okay, because I
Yes,
want,
ma'am.
okay, gotcha. I just wanted to make sure, and because this one is, there's not much left of whatever that building was originally. The production office is this one, which is down at the end. And I just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah, the shipping is a metal structure that's affixed to the production office that runs to the north from the
Okay.
production office.
Okay. So what, and let me correct, so we're looking at the possibility of demolition, but preserving for the production office, which is the one we're looking at here, and then seat house number 9. We're down to those 2 buildings. Is that what I heard you all say?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Would the committee entertain hearing from Mr. Rose?
Sure.
Thank you very much for indulging me just for a few minutes. I've been involved in the cottonseed oil processing industry for over 40 years of my career. Started work at an oil mill in Lubbock, Texas, back in the 70s. Been associated with Producers Co-op since 2013. So I've been involved with a lot of these same type facilities and properties in several different locations over the course of my career. one of the things I would like to make sure that the committee understands is that these structures are basically steel, tin siding and steel siding, and primarily for storage, and so they don't lend themselves very well to historical preservation or redevelopment of any kind. One of the company that I had before coming to Oklahoma, we did a historical development in Abilene, Texas, where we renovated an old Weather Bureau building that was brick and mortar into an office. The production office that you've seen and are discussing now is just basically a building that was used for offices and a laboratory at some point during the life of our company. But even that, when compared to some of the buildings, say, in Bricktown or in downtown Oklahoma City that have been developed over the last few years, is not as good a fit, or it's hard to compare these structures to some of the things that have been saved in Oklahoma City for historical purposes. I can appreciate the chair's comments about this has been an oil mill site for over 100 years, and it does have historical significance for the city. But I would say to you that there could be a different way to commemorate that historical significance for the city. By impeding our ability to tear down these buildings and for redevelopment and sale of the property, it's putting our company in a difficult position. We've transitioned our company from Oklahoma City to Altus, Oklahoma, where the majority of the cotton production is in the state now. When this facility was built, there was cotton production all over the state, a significant amount even east of I-35, which is probably hard for you all to visualize. It is for me, and my whole life has been in the cotton industry. But the picture of that house there, I mean, it's such a massive, it's hard to get the scale of that from a picture. I think Laura would
Yes, other than if you
agree.
look at those openings that are down near the ground and you visualize that those are taller than a person, that opening is, and then you look at the rest of the building to realize just how tall that is. And this is Seed House 4, but I wanted you to see what the inside of one of these looks like. Obviously, Seed House number 9 is bigger than this one, but as he was saying, it's just metal and on a metal frame.
So anyway, I wanted to speak to you about that. It's difficult for me from a personal standpoint to shut down a facility that's been operating for such a long period of time and has been a significant part of any community, but particularly Oklahoma City, provided jobs, provided economic benefit to all of Oklahoma, for the cotton producers, to the feed manufacturers and so forth. But the economic times that we find ourselves in has required our company to make that decision. And what I would like for you to take into consideration is for us to sell this property and to redevelop it into an entity that Oklahoma City can be proud of, can be in addition to the great work that's already been done downtown and in Bricktown. I would ask that you consider giving approval to our application as it has been presented to you. And I'd be happy to answer any questions of any of the committee members.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone have a motion to present?
I'll make a motion to approve the demolition of all the structures except production office, preserving that one structure.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Quickly. All in favor of the application, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, the motion passes. Thank you all very much. Okay, the next item on our agenda is 7B, the 2018 meeting schedule. I think we have an insert in our packet, talks about all those dates.
Yeah, it's the first Thursday of each month, just like usual. We weren't sure if we would have an October or November meeting, so we're bringing this to you in September. So we need a motion to adopt it.
At this point, I would entertain a motion to adopt the schedule.
Approve, make a motion to adopt.
Motion by Dana, need a second?
A second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That is, motion carries. Item number 8, the communications. We have 3 different items that were administratively approved that I don't have to read, right, Lisa?
I'm sorry.
don't-
No, you don't need to read them. These are just being reported for your information.
Okay. And the next item is telling us that on August 29th, the mayor and the city council appointed new members to the Riverfront Design Committee. We talked about this a little earlier. We're very pleased to have them, Mike Voorhees and Michelle Dean. Next item would be any comments from the planning staff?
Yes, in front of you, you have some information about the bond issue and sales tax election vote that's next Tuesday. If you live in Oklahoma City, make sure that's on your calendar. And this sheet is provided just as information. If you have questions or if people are asking you for more information, here's some quick facts.
Okay.
And we don't know yet. At the present time, I don't think we're going to have a meeting next month. I'm really sorry.
You're skipping ahead on the agenda.
I'm sorry. Well, you've been here almost an hour. We never were here that long. I'm sorry.
Okay. Item D, just comments from committee members. I just wanted to give our new members, Mike and Michelle, just kind of a second to introduce yourselves and kind of just tell us just a real quick something about you.
I'm Michelle Dean. I work at Devon Energy. I've been there about 12 years. I'm in their facilities and real estate department. So I oversee all the design and construction for their offices across the U.S.
Good person for me to know. Okay. Go ahead.
Mike Voorhees, I'm an attorney in the law firm Voorhees and Byers. Currently, I serve on the River Trust.
Okay.
I appreciate that opportunity and this one equally. I followed the river since it was the string of pearls when Pat Downs put that together. I can't remember when. But
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I'm sorry, Laura. So October meeting is probably not. Okay. All right, that's all we got. So at this point, I'll adjourn the meeting.